At my son's wedding, my ex-wife joked, "Anyone want my ex-husband? He's single and still thinks he's 25. The maid of honor laughed and said, "I'm single too." My ex-wife's face fell when she added, "Give me his number?" The champagne glass was halfway to my lips when Diane said it, her voice carrying across the reception hall at the Fairmont Grand Ballroom where 200 guests were celebrating my son Michael's wedding to his college sweetheart Amy. "Anyone want my ex-husband? He's single and still thinks he's 25. Laughter rippled through the crowd, that polite kind of laughter people give when someone makes an awkward joke at a formal event. I froze mid-sip, the bubbles from the champagne burning the back of my throat. Diane was holding court near the gift table, surrounded by her friends, her sister Linda, and several of Amy's bridesmaids, all dressed in elegant sage green gowns. She looked radiant in her navy cocktail dress, her hair professionally styled, diamond earrings I'd never seen before catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. She was performing, playing the role of the successful divorcee who'd escaped a mediocre marriage, and I was the punchline. Rebecca Lawson, Amy's maid of honor, a woman I'd met exactly twice during wedding planning events, set down her champagne flute and smiled. "I'm single too," she said, her voice warm and interested. More laughter, but different now, uncertain, people sensing a shift in tone. Then Rebecca added, looking directly at Diane with an expression that could have cut glass, "Give me his number?" The laughter stopped, just cut off like someone had flipped a switch. Diane's smile, that practiced smile she'd perfected during our 23-year marriage, the one she used when she was pretending everything was fine while quietly seething underneath, flickered and died. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, panic, then something that looked almost like rage. Rebecca maintained steady eye contact with her, one eyebrow slightly raised, champagne flute held loosely in her left hand, waiting for a response with the kind of calm confidence that suggested she was perfectly comfortable with confrontation. "I'm sorry. What?" Diane managed, her voice tight, her fingers gripping her own glass hard enough that I worried it might shatter. Rebecca shrugged, elegant and unbothered, a small smile playing at her lips. "You offered. I'm accepting. Your ex-husband seems lovely, and I'm genuinely single. So, what's his number?" She turned to me, still frozen with my champagne glass suspended in midair, and smiled with what appeared to be real warmth, not pity, not mockery, just genuine interest. "Unless you're going to tell me she was lying about you being available?" I found my voice, though it came out rougher than intended, scratchy from champagne and shock. "I'm available." Diane's face flushed red, that particular shade of crimson that I'd seen exactly 4 times during our marriage, always when something had gone catastrophically wrong in a public setting. "Rebecca, I was joking, obviously. It was just a funny comment about how Richard never grew up, how he's still living like we're in our 20s instead of our 50s. "Was it funny?" Rebecca asked, her tone genuinely curious, head tilted slightly as if she was examining an interesting specimen under a microscope. "Because I didn't hear anyone really laughing. What I heard was you publicly humiliating your ex-husband at your son's wedding. But if you're offering him up like he's some kind of commodity you're trying to unload, I'm interested. He's attractive. He clearly raised a wonderful son based on everything I've seen this weekend, and unlike you, he hasn't spent the past hour making snide comments about people." The table nearest to us had gone completely silent. I could see Michael's godfather, Robert, staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Amy's grandmother was clutching her pearls, literally clutching them, her mouth forming a small O of shock. Diane's sister, Linda, was trying to become invisible, shrinking into her chair, her own husband avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Rebecca, this is inappropriate," Diane said, trying to regain control of the situation, her voice taking on that authoritative tone she used at work when managing her team of analysts. "This is my son's wedding, and you're making a scene." I'd been divorced from Diane for 3 years when my son Michael got engaged. 3 years since she'd left me for Gregory Brennan, her boss at Brennan Financial Group, where she worked as a senior investment analyst, managing portfolios worth millions. Gregory was 58, wealthy in ways I could barely comprehend, drove a Tesla Model S that cost more than my annual salary, owned a lake house in Michigan worth approximately $800,000, and most importantly to Diane, represented the success and ambition she'd always insisted I lacked. I was Richard Holloway, 51 years old, high school history teacher at Lincoln Academy for 26 years, coach of the varsity debate team that had won state championships 3 years running, moderate runner who'd completed 8 half marathons, reader of historical biographies and presidential memoirs, and according to Diane's carefully constructed narrative, a man who'd wasted his considerable potential settling for a comfortable life instead of chasing wealth and status. We'd met in college at Northwestern University, both of us 21, me majoring in history and education, her in economics and finance. We'd married at 25 in a small ceremony at her parents' church, had Michael when I was 27 and she was 26, and for 2 decades I'd genuinely believed we were happy. I'd been catastrophically wrong. The signs had been there for years, I realized later, during the long nights after the divorce, when I'd lie awake in my new apartment replaying our marriage like a film I could pause and examine for clues. The comments had started small during our last 5 years together, little cuts disguised as observations or helpful suggestions. Gregory just bought his wife a Mercedes for their anniversary, a GLE 450, fully loaded. Must be nice to have a husband who values success enough to earn that kind of money. The Thompsons are renovating their kitchen. Amy Thompson showed me the plans. $35,000 for custom cabinets and marble countertops. Can you imagine having that kind of disposable income? Actually being able to improve your home instead of just maintaining it? I saw my college roommate yesterday at the club. Her husband made partner at Winston and Strawn. She said they're going to Italy for 6 weeks, staying in villas, taking cooking classes in Tuscany. When's the last time we went anywhere more exciting than your parents' cabin in Wisconsin? I'd tried to engage, tried to explain that I found genuine fulfillment in teaching, that money wasn't everything, that we had a good life with health and stability, and a son we both loved. She'd smile, that same smile from the wedding reception, tight and patient, and say she understood. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand, because for Diane, happiness had always been measured in external markers of success. 6 months before she left, I'd overheard her on the phone with her sister Linda, sitting in our bedroom while I was in the hallway outside, a basket of laundry in my hands, frozen in place by the coldness in her voice. I love Richard, but I'm not in love with him anymore. He's just so settled, content with mediocrity. I need more than a man who thinks a successful weekend is grading papers and watching PBS documentaries about the Roosevelts. Linda, I'm 50 years old. I don't want to wake up at 60 and realize I wasted my life with someone who had no drive, no ambition, no desire to build something significant. I'd stood there in the hallway, laundry basket growing heavy in my arms, and felt something fundamental crack inside me. Not break, not yet, but crack enough that I could see the fissure running through the foundation of our marriage. When she filed for divorce 3 months later, served by a process server who came to Lincoln Academy during my planning period, I wasn't surprised, just profoundly sad. Michael, 24 years old and working as a software engineer at a startup in Chicago making $90,000 a year, had struggled intensely with the divorce. He loved both his parents, understood intellectually that people grew apart, but Diane's narrative about why our marriage failed bothered him deeply. Mom keeps telling me you didn't try hard enough, he'd said over lunch at our regular monthly meeting at a sandwich shop near his office. That you gave up on ambition after I was born, that you could have been a professor or a principal or gone into educational consulting, but you chose to stay comfortable. She makes it sound like you failed her. What do you think? I'd asked, genuinely wanting to know if my son believed his mother's version of events. Michael had considered it for a long moment, thoughtful in that way he'd always been, even as a child, carefully weighing his words. I think you're happy teaching. I think you're really good at it. I remember when I was in high school and kids would come up to me and tell me your class changed how they thought about history, made them actually care about understanding the past. I think Mom wants different things than you do, and that's okay. People are allowed to want different things, but it doesn't make you wrong for wanting what you want. He'd paused, taking a bite of his turkey sandwich. Also, I think Mom's definition of success is kind of shallow. You measure your life in students who went on to become teachers or politicians or activists because you inspired them. She measures hers in portfolio performance and annual bonuses. Neither is wrong, but you can't judge someone by metrics they never agreed to compete on. Now, 3 years later, at his wedding to Amy, Diane was still constructing that narrative, still positioning herself as the woman who'd escaped a mediocre marriage to find true success and happiness with Gregory. Except Gregory wasn't at the wedding. They'd broken up 8 months ago, a fact I'd learned from Michael during one of our lunches, delivered with visible discomfort because he didn't want me to feel vindicated by his mother's pain. Mom's devastated, he'd told me, pushing his fries around his plate. Apparently, Gregory decided he wasn't ready to commit long-term, after 3 years of dating, after she'd moved into his condo downtown. He said he valued his independence too much to get married again. She's been staying with Aunt Linda for the past 2 months while she figures out her next move. I'd felt a complicated mix of sympathy and vindication, two emotions I wasn't proud of holding simultaneously. Sympathy because divorce and breakup pain was real, regardless of the circumstances that led to it. Because I remembered the hollowness of those first months alone, the weight of failure, even when you knew intellectually that the relationship was wrong. Vindication, because maybe, just maybe, Diane's pursuit of wealth and status hadn't delivered the happiness she'd expected, hadn't filled whatever void she'd thought a successful partner would fill. But I'd kept those feelings to myself, just told Michael I was sorry his mother was going through a difficult time, that breakups were hard at any age. What I didn't tell Michael was that I'd run into Gregory 6 months earlier at a coffee shop downtown. He'd been with a woman who looked to be in her late 30s, beautiful and laughing at something he'd said. He'd seen me, and his face had gone slightly pale. We'd both pretended not to recognize each other, but the message was clear. Gregory had moved on quickly, probably had been moving on before the official breakup. Diane had chased success and found someone who saw her as temporary, disposable, one in a series rather than the final chapter. Here at the wedding, surrounded by friends and family who knew about the breakup, Diane was performing success, wearing expensive clothes, making jokes about her settled ex-husband, carefully avoiding any mention of her own failed relationship, until Rebecca Lawson called her bluff. The reception hall had gone quiet in that terrible way, where everyone is suddenly very interested in their dinner plates while desperately wanting to hear what happens next. Rebecca was still standing there, calm and poised, champagne flute held loosely, waiting for either Diane's response or my phone number. Diane looked at me for the first time that evening, really looked at me across the space of table 6 where I'd been seated, and I saw something in her expression I couldn't quite identify. Regret, anger, embarrassment, all three fighting for dominance. "Richard, tell her I was joking," Diane said, her voice trying for lightness, but landing somewhere near desperation, a note I'd heard before during our last argument before the divorce. "Tell her we're not actually trading ex-spouses at our son's wedding like we're swapping recipes." I set down my champagne glass carefully, deliberately, and stood up from my assigned seat at table 6, the divorced parents' table, deliberately placed far from the head table where Michael and Amy sat, strategically positioned to minimize potential drama. The wedding planner, a woman named Claire, who'd been very clear about seating arrangements during the planning process, had actually apologized to me about the placement. "Standard protocol for divorced parents," she'd explained. "We seat you separately to avoid conflict." Now I walked across the reception hall toward Rebecca and Diane, aware that 200 sets of eyes were tracking my movement. "Why would I do that?" I asked quietly when I reached them. "Rebecca seems lovely, and you did offer, publicly, in front of everyone here." Diane's face went from red to pale, the color draining so quickly I worried she might actually faint. "You're not serious. This is absurd. You're making a joke to embarrass me." "Am I?" I kept my voice level, calm. The same tone I used in my classroom when a student was disrupting class and I needed to regain control without escalating. "Because Rebecca's the one who asked for my number. All I'm doing is deciding whether to give it to her. Why not? You've spent 3 years telling everyone I'm a disappointment, that I lack ambition, that you upgraded to someone better, someone more successful, someone who could give you the life you deserved. Here's someone who seems interested despite all that. Maybe I should see if she actually means it." Rebecca smiled, pulled her phone from her clutch with one hand while maintaining her grip on the champagne flute with the other, and walked over to me, closing the distance between us. "I absolutely mean it. Your ex-wife has spent the entire cocktail hour telling stories about your failures. She told a group of women by the bar that you were so unambitious you'd turned down a principal position at a private school 3 years ago because it would have meant less time with students. She said it like it was a character flaw. I found myself thinking that anyone she considers a failure might actually be exactly my type." Up close, Rebecca was striking, early to mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant updo, sharp green eyes that missed nothing, a dusting of freckles across her nose that her makeup didn't quite hide. She was tall, maybe 5'9", and moved with the kind of confidence that suggested she was very comfortable in her own skin. I gave Rebecca my number. She entered it into her phone with quick efficiency, her fingers flying across the screen, then took a selfie of us together, leaning in so our faces were close, her smile genuine and bright. "For your contact photo," she explained, showing me the picture before saving it. We looked good together, I noticed with some surprise. Natural. "Want to get a drink at the bar and let Diane process whatever just happened?" We walked away from table 6 and Diane's stunned circle of friends, leaving her standing there with Linda and the bridesmaids, all of whom were suddenly very busy examining their manicures or finding something fascinating about the centerpieces. I could feel Diane's eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. The bartender, a young woman with purple highlights and a professional smile, asked what we wanted. "Whiskey, neat," I said. "Maker's Mark if you have it." "Same," Rebecca added. "Actually, make mine a double. I think I just committed to something either very brave or very stupid." The bartender grinned as she poured, clearly aware of the drama that had just unfolded. "Brave," she said quietly as she handed us our drinks. "I've been listening to that woman tear down her ex-husband for the past hour while I've been serving drinks. You did him a favor." We took our whiskeys to a quiet corner of the reception hall, away from the dance floor where Michael and Amy were preparing for their first dance, away from the gift table and Diane's ongoing crisis, to a small alcove with a window overlooking the Chicago skyline. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've done in months," I said, taking a sip of whiskey that burned pleasantly on the way down. "Which one?" Rebecca asked. "Giving you my number or walking away from my ex-wife mid-humiliation?" "Definitely brave, though I should probably admit something before this goes any further." She took a sip of her own whiskey, studying me over the rim of the glass. "I knew exactly what I was doing when I asked for your number. Your ex-wife has been insufferable all weekend, not just tonight. During the rehearsal dinner last night at that Italian restaurant in River North, she spent 20 minutes telling a table full of people about her expensive vacation plans to Bali and her new condo in the Gold Coast. Then she made 3 separate comments about how you still lived in a modest apartment and taught children instead of pursuing a real career. Amy was ready to uninvite her to the actual wedding." My stomach sank slightly, that familiar feeling of embarrassment that had become constant during the last year of my marriage. "So this was just you calling her out? Not actual interest? Because I should tell you, I've had enough pity in my life. I don't need more." Rebecca met my eyes directly, and I saw no pity there, just honest interest. It started as calling her out. But here's the thing, Richard. I've been watching you all weekend. Not in a creepy way, she added quickly. But at the rehearsal dinner, you gave this beautiful toast about Michael, about raising him to be thoughtful and kind, about how proud you were of the man he'd become. You talked about teaching him to think critically, to question assumptions, to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. You made everyone cry, including me, and I'd only met you twice before. She continued, her voice softer now, more intimate. During the ceremony today, I saw you tearing up when Michael said his vows, when he promised to love Amy with patience and kindness. I saw you mouth the words along with him, like you'd helped him practice. And tonight, before your ex-wife started her performance, I saw you helping an elderly guest find her seat, making sure she had water and could see the head table, being genuinely kind to everyone around you without any expectation of recognition or reward. She paused, taking another sip of whiskey. So, yeah, I asked for your number initially to shut down a bully who was being cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. But I'm keeping it because I'd actually like to get to know you, if you're interested. I studied her face carefully, looking for signs of pity or manipulation or game playing, the kind of social maneuvering I'd never been good at detecting. I'd been married for 23 years and divorced for 3. I'd been on exactly 4 dates during those 3 years, all of them set up by well-meaning friends from the teacher's lounge, all of them awkward and ultimately pointless because the women had either wanted someone more successful or had been recently divorced and not actually ready to date. I'd started to accept that maybe I was just meant to be alone, content with my teaching and my running and my books and my monthly lunches with Michael. The idea of actually trying again, of opening myself up to potential rejection or, worse, another relationship where I was fundamentally not enough, made my chest tight. I'm interested, I heard myself say, the words coming out before my brain could fully process them. But I should warn you, I'm exactly what Diane said I am. I teach high school history at Lincoln Academy. I make $68,000 a year. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Evanston that I rent, not own. I spend my weekends grading papers and training for half marathons. I drive a 2015 Subaru with 120,000 miles on it. I'm not ambitious in the traditional sense, not in the way society measures success. Rebecca smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger and more approachable. Richard, I'm a public defender. I make $53,000 a year representing people who can't afford attorneys, most of whom are guilty of something, even if not always what they're charged with. I live in a studio apartment in Logan Square that's approximately 450 square feet, including the bathroom. I spend my weekends preparing case files and volunteering at a legal aid clinic helping people navigate housing court. I drive a 2012 Toyota Camry that my dad gave me when he upgraded. If your ex-wife thinks you lack ambition, she'd consider me a complete failure who wasted a perfectly good law degree from Northwestern. She paused. But I love my job. I believe in what I do. I think everyone deserves a competent defense regardless of their ability to pay. And I'm perfectly happy with my life, even if it doesn't look successful by conventional standards. So maybe we're exactly the right kind of unsuccessful for each other. We talked for an hour, standing in that alcove while the wedding reception swirled around us. She told me about her work, about the case she'd just won where she'd gotten assault charges dismissed against a homeless man who'd been defending himself, about her decision to become a public defender despite her law school classmates pursuing positions at corporate firms that paid 3 times as much. I told her about teaching, about the student who'd emailed me last month to say my AP US history class had inspired her to major in political science at Georgetown, about my debate team that had just qualified for nationals. We talked about books. I'd just finished Ron Cherno's biography of Ulysses Grant. She was reading Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. We talked about music, running, the specific anxiety of watching people you care about get married and wondering if you'd ever find that kind of connection again. At 9:15 p.m., Michael and Amy found us in our alcove. Dad, Michael said, looking between me and Rebecca with poorly concealed delight spreading across his face. Everything okay? Mom said you were being weird, quote unquote, and that Rebecca was taking advantage of you or something equally ridiculous. Define weird, I said, noting that Michael was trying very hard not to smile. Amy, beautiful in her wedding dress that had cost more than my monthly rent, grinned openly. She'd never particularly liked Diane, I'd learned during the wedding planning process. She said you were flirting with my maid of honor to spite her, to embarrass her in front of her friends. Rebecca, please tell me you're actually interested, and not just being nice because my new mother-in-law was being terrible. Rebecca laughed, genuine and warm. I'm actually interested. Your father-in-law is far more interesting than your new mother-in-law suggested. In fact, he's pretty much the opposite of everything she described. Michael hugged me, a real hug, the kind we'd shared less frequently as he'd gotten older, but that still meant everything to me. Good. Mom's been awful all weekend. She keeps making comments about Dad not being successful enough to afford a gift like Gregory would have given us. She actually said that to Amy's parents during the cocktail hour, compared what you gave us to what Gregory probably would have given if they were still together. For the record, Dad, the first edition signed copy of The Federalist Papers you gave us is worth more to me than anything Gregory could have bought. I'm a history nerd because of you, and that gift shows you actually know me. Gregory sent a check, Amy added, her voice dripping with disdain. $3,000. Very generous, very impersonal, very, I have money, but no idea who you actually are. Your gift made us cry. We stayed up until 2 in the morning reading Hamilton's essays and talking about what it means to build a democracy from scratch. They drifted back to their other guests, but not before Michael squeezed my shoulder and whispered, I'm really glad you're here, Dad. And I'm really glad you're talking to Rebecca. You deserve to be happy. They left Rebecca and me alone again in our alcove. First edition Federalist Papers? She asked, eyebrows raised. That's ambitious gift-giving. Actually, those aren't cheap. Took me 6 months to find it through a rare book dealer in Boston and cost most of my savings, I admitted. About $4,000, which is absurd for a book, I know. But Michael loves early American history. When he was 12, we spent an entire summer reading the Federalist Papers together and discussing the debates between Hamilton and Jefferson. It felt right, more meaningful than furniture or cash. That's beautiful, Rebecca said softly. That's the kind of gift that shows you actually know someone, that you pay attention to what matters to them. Money's just money. Thoughtfulness is rare. At 10:30 p.m., Diane found us. She'd been drinking, I could tell immediately, enough that her carefully maintained composure had started to slip, her words slightly slurred, her movements less controlled. Richard, can we talk? Privately? Her voice had that edge it always got when she was angry, but trying to pretend she wasn't. I looked at Rebecca, who squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt both supportive and intimate. I'll get another drink. Find me when you're done. Diane led me outside to the hotel terrace overlooking the Chicago skyline, the terrace that had probably been photographed extensively during the cocktail hour. The September air was cool, comfortable, the kind of evening I'd always loved, that perfect temperature where you didn't need a jacket, but could feel the promise of autumn coming. The skyline was beautiful, lit up against the darkening sky, the kind of view that normally would have made me appreciate the city I'd lived in my entire life. What are you doing? Diane demanded, her voice sharp, angry, abandoning any pretense of civility now that we were alone. What am I doing? I'm talking to a woman who seems interested in me. She's 13 years younger than you. She's 38. I'm 51. That's 13 years, not 20. And since when do you care who I date? You left me 3 years ago. You chose Gregory. You don't get to have opinions about my romantic life anymore. Diane's hands were shaking, I noticed, actually trembling as she gripped the terrace railing. You're making a fool of yourself, chasing after some woman who's clearly just pitying you after I made a harmless joke. Can't you see that? She feels sorry for you. Harmless, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Diane, you've spent 3 years telling everyone I'm a failure. Tonight, at our son's wedding, you announced to a room full of people that I'm pathetic and single and still mentally stuck at 25. When someone actually expressed interest, genuine interest, you're angry. Why? She didn't answer for a long moment, just stared out at the city lights, her profile sharp against the illuminated skyline. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable than I'd heard it in years. Because Gregory left me. Because I'm 50 and alone and everyone knows it. Everyone at this wedding knows that the man I left you for, the man I told everyone was so much better, so much more successful, dumped me after 3 years. And seeing you potentially happy with someone makes me feel like maybe I made a mistake, like maybe I threw away something good chasing something that looked shinier. There it was. The truth under the performance. The real reason for the jokes, the put-downs, the need to make me seem pathetic. If I was pathetic, then leaving me had been justified. If I was a failure, then her choice to pursue Gregory made sense. But if I was actually fine, actually capable of being happy and finding someone who appreciated me, then maybe she'd made the wrong choice. You want me to be alone so you don't feel bad about your choices, I said quietly. That's not fair, Richard. No? You've spent 3 years tearing me down to justify leaving me, making sure everyone knows you upgraded. Except you didn't upgrade, did you? Gregory was never going to commit. You were convenient, available, already established in your career. But when it came time to actually build a life together, he chose his independence over you. And now you're angry because maybe, just maybe, the man you left is going to end up happier than you are. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's cruel. Is it? Or is it just honest? Diane, I loved you. Past tense, loved. For 23 years I loved you. I thought we were building a life together. I thought we wanted the same things. A family, meaningful work, a comfortable home. But we didn't want the same things. You wanted wealth and status and excitement. And that's fine. People are allowed to want those things. But you can't keep making me the villain in your story just because I wanted different things than you did. I don't know how to be happy alone, she whispered. And for the first time since our divorce, I saw genuine vulnerability in her face. Then figure it out, I said, not unkindly. Go to therapy, travel, join clubs, do whatever you need to do. But Diane, you need to stop using me as your excuse for why things didn't work out the way you planned. I'm not responsible for your happiness. I never was. Even when we were married. That's something you have to find for yourself. Did you find it? She asked. Are you happy? I thought about it honestly. I'm content. I love my job. I love my students. I love watching Michael build his life. I love my running and my books and my debate team. Could I have more money or a bigger apartment or a fancier car? Sure. But would those things actually make me happier? I don't think so. I think I have exactly what I need. And Rebecca? I don't know yet. Maybe she's someone who could add to that happiness. Maybe she's not. But I'd like the chance to find out, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop trying to sabotage that before it even starts. I walked back inside, leaving Diane on the terrace staring at the skyline. Rebecca was at the bar talking to Amy's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Delgado, laughing at something Amy's father had said. When she saw me, she excused herself and came over, searching my face for signs of damage. How'd it go? She admitted she's been tearing me down because she's unhappy and wanted me to be unhappy too. She's jealous that I might find someone when she's alone after her relationship with Gregory imploded. Rebecca's expression softened with understanding. That's sad. For her. Yeah. But it's not my problem anymore. I spent 23 years trying to make her happy. I can't spend the rest of my life letting her make me miserable. The wedding ended at midnight. Michael and Amy left for their honeymoon in Greece, 2 weeks island hopping that they'd saved for over a year. Rebecca and I exchanged numbers again, redundantly, just to be absolutely sure. We stood in the hotel lobby while other guests filtered out, calling Ubers and retrieving coats from the coat check. Can I take you to dinner? I asked, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't been since I was 25, asking Diane out for the first time. Somewhere not fancy. I know a great Thai place in Evanston that serves the best pad see ew I've ever had. Very casual, very unpretentious. Friday night? Rebecca asked. I'm in court all day Thursday and Friday, but I should be done by 6. Friday works perfectly. I'll pick you up at 7? She wrote her address on a cocktail napkin, Logan Square, an apartment building I didn't recognize but could find easily enough. It's a date, she said, then stood on her toes and kissed my cheek. Thank you for being brave tonight, for giving me your number, for walking away from someone who was hurting you. That takes courage. We went to dinner on Friday at Sticky Rice, the Thai place I'd mentioned. Rebecca ordered the same dish I did, pad see ew with extra vegetables, and we spent 2 hours talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her week in court, about getting a deal for a client that would mean probation instead of prison time. I told her about my debate team's practice, about preparing them for nationals. We discovered we'd both been to the same used book warehouse on the north side. Both loved hiking in the Indiana dunes. Both had complicated relationships with our mothers. On Sunday, we met for coffee at Everybody's Coffee in Uptown. Rebecca brought case files to work on, I brought papers to grade. We sat across from each other at a small table, working in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing interesting bits from what we were reading. Listen to this argument, she'd say, reading from a brief. This prosecutor is trying to claim my client's poverty as evidence of criminal intent. That's absurd, I'd respond, then share a particularly insightful essay from one of my AP students. It felt natural, easy, like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. The following Saturday, we went for a hike along the lakefront, starting at Montrose Beach and walking south to Navy Pier and back, about 8 miles total. Rebecca kept pace easily, her stride matching mine, both of us comfortable with extended silences, punctuated by observation about the boats on the lake or the architecture of the buildings we passed. I was engaged once, Rebecca told me as we stopped to rest at the North Avenue beach. 5 years ago. Called it off 3 months before the wedding. What happened? He wanted me to quit public defense and join his father's corporate law firm. Said I'd make 3 times as much money, that we could buy a house in the suburbs, that I was wasting my potential representing criminals. When I said no, that my work mattered to me, he said I was being selfish and immature. So I gave him back the ring. Do you regret it? I asked. She shook her head firmly. Not for a second. I regret wasting 3 years with someone who fundamentally didn't respect what I do, but I don't regret choosing my work over someone who wanted me to be different. Diane said something similar to me, I admitted. That I was wasting my potential teaching high school when I could have been a principal or a professor or a consultant. That I was being selfish choosing a job I loved over a job that paid better. I think that's when I realized we weren't going to make it, when she said choosing meaningful work over lucrative work was selfish. It's not selfish, Rebecca said firmly. It's honest. Most people spend their lives doing work they hate to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. We're lucky enough to have found work we believe in. That's rare. 6 weeks after the wedding, Michael called me, excited and slightly nervous. Dad, I need to tell you something. Mom called me yesterday. She's mad about you and Rebecca. What did she say? She said you were rushing into something to spite her, that Rebecca was too young for you, that you were embarrassing yourself. She asked me to talk to you about slowing down. I felt anger flare in my chest. What did you tell her? I told her you seemed happier than I'd seen you in years, that Rebecca was great, that you deserved to move on, and I told her that maybe she should focus on her own life instead of trying to control yours. Pride swelled in my chest. Thank you, Michael. Dad, you raised me to stand up for what's right. Mom was wrong to call me, wrong to ask me to get involved, and definitely wrong about how you should live your life. Don't let her make you second-guess this. 6 weeks after the wedding, Diane called me directly. It was a Thursday evening. I was grading papers in my apartment. Rebecca was due to come over for dinner in an hour. "I wanted to apologize," she said without preamble when I answered. "For the past 3 years. For the wedding. For all of it." "Why now?" I asked, not willing to make this easy for her. "Because I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Winters, she's been helping me work through why my relationship with Gregory failed, why I've been so angry all the time. She has me doing this exercise where I have to identify the narratives I've constructed about my life and examine whether they're true or just stories I tell myself to avoid accountability. And the narrative I constructed about you, about our marriage, it wasn't fair. You weren't mediocre. You were content. There's a difference, and I couldn't see it because I was so unhappy with myself. I kept thinking that if I had a more successful partner, a bigger house, more money, I'd finally feel fulfilled. But Gregory gave me all those things, and I was still miserable. The problem wasn't you, Richard. The problem was me not knowing how to be happy with what I had. I didn't know what to say. This was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. After a moment, Diane continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I heard you're seeing Rebecca. Amy told me. She says you seem really happy, that you smile more, that you seem lighter. I'm glad. You deserve that." "Thank you," I said quietly. "I am happy. Rebecca she's different from what I expected. She gets it, you know? She understands choosing meaningful work over lucrative work. She doesn't think I'm settling or wasting my potential. She thinks I'm exactly who I should be." "I'm sorry I couldn't see that," Diane said. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough, when the truth was, I was the one who wasn't enough. Not enough at being content. Not enough at appreciating what I had." We hung up after a few more minutes of awkward but genuine conversation. When Rebecca arrived for dinner an hour later, I told her about the call. "Do you believe her?" she asked as I handed her a glass of wine. "I think I believe she's trying. Whether she actually changes, time will tell. But honestly, it's not my problem anymore. She's my ex-wife, the mother of my son, and I want her to be happy. But I don't need her validation or her approval." "Good," Rebecca said, leaning against my kitchen counter. "Because you're pretty great exactly as you are." 3 months after the wedding, Rebecca and I were dating exclusively. She kept a drawer at my apartment. I kept a change of clothes at hers. We'd settled into a rhythm. Dinner together most evenings, either cooking at one of our apartments or trying new restaurants. Weekends spent hiking or visiting museums or grading papers and preparing case files side by side. She came to one of my debate team competitions and was genuinely impressed by the students' arguments. I attended one of her trials and watched her demolish a prosecutor's shaky case with precise cross-examination. 6 months after the wedding, I met Rebecca's family during Christmas in Madison, Wisconsin. Her parents, both retired middle school teachers, loved hearing about my classroom strategies and my debate team's recent national competition. Her father, Thomas, and I spent an hour discussing the best ways to teach critical thinking. Her mother, Carol, showed me photo albums from Rebecca's childhood, pointing out Rebecca's participation in mock trial and debate team. "She's always been like this," Carol said warmly. "Always fighting for the underdog, always questioning authority, always choosing the hard right over the easy wrong." Her siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, all older than Rebecca, grilled me good-naturedly about my intentions. "Rebecca doesn't bring people home unless it's serious," her brother James warned. "So if you're not serious, now's the time to bail before Mom starts planning the wedding." "I'm serious," I said, and meant it. Her 8-year-old nephew, precocious and direct, asked me during Christmas dinner if I was going to marry Aunt Rebecca. "Maybe someday," I said, glancing at Rebecca across the table. "If she'll have me." Rebecca smiled, reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Maybe someday," she echoed. A year after the wedding, Michael and Amy announced they were expecting their first child. We celebrated at a family dinner at their apartment, just the 4 of us initially, though they mentioned they'd told Diane separately. "How'd she take it?" I asked Michael. "She cried happy tears, said she was excited to be a grandmother, asked if she could be involved. She was actually really sweet about it." 2 weeks later, at Michael and Amy's baby shower, I saw Diane for the first time since the wedding. She arrived alone, carrying an expensive diaper bag and a wrapped gift. She looked different, I noticed. Less polished, less performative. Her hair was simpler, her outfit nice but not designer, her makeup minimal. When she saw me talking to Rebecca near the refreshment table, she hesitated, then approached. "Richard, Rebecca, congratulations on the baby," she said to me, confused. "Michael's baby, obviously. Not, I didn't mean..." She was flustered, more genuine than I'd seen her in years. "I know what you meant," I said, trying to ease her discomfort. "Thank you." "I'm seeing someone," Diane offered, unprompted. "His name is David. He teaches chemistry at Northwestern. We met through mutual friends. He's..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's kind, patient. Not wealthy, not flashy, just genuinely good. I'm trying to do better this time, to appreciate what actually matters." "I'm glad," I said, and found that I meant it. You deserve to be happy, Diane. She looked at Rebecca. I owe you an apology. For the wedding. For trying to humiliate Richard. For being cruel. You did him a favor. Calling me out. I needed to hear it. Rebecca nodded graciously. We all need someone to call us out sometimes. I'm glad you're doing well. Diane smiled, something genuine and unguarded. You're good for him. He seems lighter than I've seen him in years. Take care of him. She moved on to talk to other guests, leaving Rebecca and me alone. That was surprisingly mature, Rebecca observed. People change, I said. Sometimes they need to lose something to appreciate what they had. Or what they could have had. 2 years after the wedding, Rebecca and I got engaged. It happened on a Saturday morning in October, during our weekly run along the lakefront. We'd stopped at our usual spot near Fullerton Beach, catching our breath and watching boats on the lake. I want to spend my life with you, I said, pulling out the simple gold band I'd been carrying in my running jacket pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. I want to grade papers together and argue about historical interpretations, and go to your trials and have Sunday morning coffee and grow old together. Will you marry me? Rebecca laughed, tears streaming down her face. You're proposing in running clothes? We're both sweating. I'm not wearing makeup. I probably smell terrible. You look perfect to me. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. Put the ring on before I change my mind about your questionable proposal timing. We got married at the courthouse 6 months later with Michael and Amy as witnesses, Amy 7 months pregnant and radiantly happy. We kept it simple, no elaborate production, just the two of us making promises in front of a judge and the people we loved most. Diane sent flowers and a card that said, Congratulations, you both deserve happiness. I mean that sincerely. We honeymooned in Maine, hiking Acadia National Park, and eating lobster rolls and reading books on the beach. No fancy hotels, no luxury resorts, just comfortable B&Bs and spectacular coastal views, and time together without the demands of work or family. This is perfect, Rebecca said one evening as we watched the sunset from Cadillac Mountain. This is exactly what I needed. No regrets about the courthouse wedding? Amy's mother seemed disappointed we didn't have a big ceremony. No regrets. I don't need a performance. I just needed to marry you. We came home to Chicago, to our decision to keep both our apartments for now, since neither could quite accommodate all our books and case files and debate team materials and running equipment. We'd figure out the living situation eventually, we decided. What mattered was that we'd found each other, two people who measured success in meaningful work and genuine connections, rather than bank accounts and status symbols. 3 years after Michael's wedding, I stood in the hospital room holding my granddaughter, Eleanor Rose, named partly after my mother and partly after Rebecca's grandmother. She was perfect, 8 pounds 4 ounces, with Michael's dark hair and Amy's nose and lungs that worked impressively well based on her current volume. Michael stood next to me, exhausted and elated, while Amy slept and Rebecca took photos. You're going to be a great grandfather, Michael said quietly. You were a great father. You taught me what matters, what's actually important in life. What's that? That success isn't about money or status or impressing people. It's about being present for the people you love. It's about doing work that matters. It's about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. That's the legacy you gave me, Dad. That's what I want to give Eleanor. Diane arrived an hour later, bringing balloons and flowers and genuine excitement about being a grandmother. Her boyfriend David came with her, a quiet man in his 50s who taught chemistry and clearly adored her. They stayed briefly, appropriately, not trying to dominate the moment. As they were leaving, Diane pulled me aside. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being gracious, for not holding grudges, for showing me that happiness doesn't look like I thought it did. Watching you with Rebecca, seeing how happy you are, it helped me understand what I was doing wrong. I was chasing an image instead of building a life. You built a life, Richard. You always were building a life. I just couldn't see it. I never did ask Rebecca if she'd genuinely been interested that night at the wedding, or if it had started purely as calling out Diane's cruelty. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she'd seen something in me worth pursuing, something my ex-wife had spent years insisting wasn't valuable. A man who thought teaching was meaningful work, who found success in student achievements rather than salary increases, who measured wealth in experiences and relationships rather than bank accounts. Diane had been right about one thing. I did still think like I was 25 in some ways. 25-year-old Richard had believed that doing work you loved mattered more than doing work that paid well, that being present for people mattered more than being impressive to people. That contentment was an achievement, not a failure. 54-year-old Richard still believed all those things. The difference was that now I had a partner who believed them too, who thought my contentment was attractive rather than pathetic, who measured my worth by the lives I'd touched rather than the money I'd earned. At Michael and Amy's baby shower, sitting in their living room surrounded by friends and family, holding my granddaughter while Rebecca chatted with Amy about parenting books, I caught Diane watching us from across the room. She looked sad for a moment, then smiled, a real smile, genuine and unguarded. She raised her glass of sparkling cider and a small toast. I raised mine back. Some people needed to chase bigger things to find happiness. needed expensive cars and lake houses and titles and status symbols. There was nothing wrong with that path if it genuinely fulfilled them. But I'd found happiness in a rented apartment shared with Rebecca, in a classroom full of teenagers arguing about reconstruction, in a debate team trophy shelf, in weekend runs along the lakefront, in Sunday morning coffee and books and papers, to grade side by side with someone who understood that meaningful wasn't the same as lucrative. Diane had asked at the wedding if anyone wanted her ex-husband, the one who was single and still thought he was 25, still believed in choosing purpose over profit. Rebecca had said yes, had asked for my number, had given me a chance to prove that contentment wasn't the same as settling, that happiness didn't require a six-figure salary or designer clothes or impressive vacation destinations. And 4 years later, married to Rebecca, holding my granddaughter, watching Michael build his own family, I could honestly say that was the best trade anyone had ever made. Rebecca got a man who would always choose meaningful work over lucrative work, who would always prioritize presence over performance, who would always measure success in lives touched rather than money earned. And I got someone who thought all of that was exactly what she wanted. Diane spent years trying to trade me away, metaphorically, to anyone who would validate her choice to leave. In the end, someone actually wanted what she was offering, and that someone saw value where Diane had seen only mediocrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, finding someone who loves you exactly as you are, and building a life that matters even if it doesn't look impressive from the outside. I'd built that life. Rebecca had joined me in it. And together, we'd shown Diane that the man she'd considered a disappointment was exactly what someone else had been looking for all along. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.